Welcome to the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. I'm Sean Aylmer. We've spoken previously about Dyson, a brand synonymous with innovation. We've talked about the company itself, how it began with James Dyson and the pursuit of a better vacuum cleaner. We've talked about the design process and the testing that goes into the products to make sure they uphold the values of the brand. Today, I wanted to talk about why the products are important, why the demand is growing, and why they matter as we head into summer. James Shale is the Service Manager for Australia and New Zealand and a long-time engineer with Dyson, which is, of course, a supporter of this podcast. James, welcome back to Fear and Greed.
Thanks for having me back.
We'll get to some of the myths about air quality in a minute, but first, why has Dyson identified this as such a major focus for the company?
I think Dyson is about solving problems. And, we were playing in the bladeless fan category. And part of our innovation is always about trying to do things better. We realized that air quality was a real problem that caused real health issues for our owners around the world. And we thought we'd do some technological innovation to try and improve that problem in the world.
Okay. Is air quality something that has become a greater problem, or is it something that's been exacerbated by COVID because people have become more aware of it? Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, so I would say when we first entered the space, some markets are very sensitive around air quality. And, in China, for instance, in a hotel lobby, you would have a display of the AQ in the facility. So some markets were very aware. In other markets, and I would put Australia in this category, the general awareness and concern for it wasn't particularly high. What we've seen with COVID is that people's understanding of how a microscopic particle in the air that you can't see can be very negative for your health. And so it's brought the purifier market as a whole, not just Dyson, really quite far forward because people really understand the problem now.
James, I've just got to pick you up there. Only an engineering in this area would call air quality AQ.
Okay.
Well done.
Sorry, yeah. Us engineers are famous for using acronyms.
Abbreviations. So do the requirements for air purification differ depending on whether it's home, commercial, whether you're in a lobby in Shanghai, whether you're in my home in the suburbs of Sydney? Is it different? I mean, and obviously office spaces are often larger with more people, but they don't have pets and children and things like that running around.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many variables that affect air quality. One of the things that we found, which was quite a surprise, I think, was that you always think of air quality, you think of, factories and back burners and industry. So you think outdoor air quality would be worse. But actually in homes, because you have a lot of insulation to trap the heat for the winter, the particles that are kind of polluting the atmosphere get trapped. So we've actually found that indoor air quality is generally considerably worse. And yeah, I mean, there's so many variables. Like formaldehyde is a big one that we're focusing on at the minute. So any kind of wooden products can produce formaldehyde, and that's terrible for the health. The weather, so in the summer in Australia, particularly, dust and ozone levels rise, and they're actually quite negative to health. So that's a particularly key focus in Australia. And yeah, I mean, the pets as well, the dander that comes off their skin and fur, again, is another really nasty particle that you want to get rid of. So there's so many variables that make up air quality.
And potentially my home is the worst spot for me in terms of AQ. I'm going to start using your acronym. In terms of AQ, the home is as bad as anywhere I'm going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's everything. One of the biggest causes of pollutants that's really significant is when people have drive-in garages, which I think is quite common in Australia because the cars producing nitrogen dioxide is the main one I would probably call out. Your exhaust fumes put that into the house and then it gets trapped in the house. So I think that's another one that's pretty specific to Australia where people might actually have garages.
Stay with me, James. We'll be back in a minute. My guest this morning is Dyson engineer James Shale. Actually, another one which in my area, because I live in a very leafy suburb, they have burn-offs close by regularly. And sometimes the air quality is just horrendous in the house and outside the house.
So I can give you some data on this.
Excellent.
With the machines that we have in Australia, we can learn about air quality. And during the peak of the bushfires, the biggest bushfires, we found on average that in close proximity to them, the air quality indoors was 7 times worse.
Wow. What? That's extraordinary.
Yeah, I was staggered. I actually saw that when I was not working in Australia. I was working in Japan. And the first thing I did was forward the raw data on a geomap to the Australian team, so they could use that to show the problem that the technology solves.
Yeah, that is quite amazing. I mean, when we think about bushfires and that, it's actually quite tangible. But one of the big myths around air pollution is that it's not always visible. Isn't that correct? I mean, the sort of smaller, odorless pollutants can be as dangerous as bushfires.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the smallest particle I can think of is probably formaldehyde. That's a really tiny particle, and a lot of innovation went into working out a mechanism to break that down into carbon dioxide and water vapor. But yeah, I mean, dust is probably the biggest particle size that you can see in the air visibly, particularly on a sunny day. But then you've got things like bacteria, viruses, VOCs. So we were talking about VOCs is another acronym. It stands for volatile organic compounds. So that's going to be your gases. All of these things are molecular particle size, so you're not going to see them with the naked eye.
So what's the solution that Dyson has come up with?
So basically we looked at the components that cause harmful pollutants in the air, and we actually had to come up with a multitude of solutions. So to remove particulate matter, and that's going to be a big one that comes off backburning and bushfires, you've folded over some glass HEPA media and you pleat it. And that really fine material is really great for picking out really small particles. Then when it gets to the gases, obviously the gases can travel through that HEPA media. So instead what we use is granulated carbon, and that's going to be really good for taking out the gases. But equally, for me, I used to have a show cat, and it made our house really smell. So removing odors is really key with the granulated carbon technology as well. And then for the removal of formaldehyde, I would say this is the cleverest innovation. It's a catalytic solution. So it works much like the catalytic converter on your car. It takes the particle, the formaldehyde particle in. You then have a chemical reaction with the material, and that breaks the harmful formaldehyde particle down into carbon dioxide and water, which is completely harmless. It's in the air everywhere.
Like, this is a whole new world to me. Are you a chemical engineer?
No, so my background is mechanical engineering and product design. But when I first joined the company, I joined the environmental control division and just got super interested in air quality. I think in Dyson, we have 14,000 engineers or technical people.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in a company that's making products to this kind of detail,
yeah,
it's not like one person designs a product. You get very focused on one element of the design and product, and you're really trying to engineer perfection. So you have to be a bit obsessive with the problem and the understanding and the testing and how you can continue to get better.
I think I read somewhere, I mean, certainly Dyson, you promote that you go well beyond global standards. Was there something about using a living room as a basis for a test where there's a bunch of sensors around and you kind of pick up what pollutants are in the air? Am I making that up?
Yes. So I think the philosophy is we want products that actually solve problems. So the most industry standard method to measure, how successful a purifier is CADR. We kind of looked at that method, and it's in a tiny box room with a ceiling fan circulating current. And we kind of went, well, we don't think that's representative of a real home. So we test to polar, which is essentially a room the size of a living room with 9 sensors spaced all around it and no ceiling fan to distribute airflow. And we like to test our products to ensure that every facet of that room is getting the purified air. We think it's a much better test method.
So, James, you think this is an area, partly because of COVID, but partly just because people are more aware of it, where there will be growth, where people will think more about air quality, where they're prepared to spend more money on achieving better air quality?
Yeah, I think so. I think in the new normal post-COVID, people are just generally more conscious about cleanliness and more aware of the problems to health that can be in the air. So I definitely see the sector generally beyond Dyson growing.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
more and more people are going to be inclined to invest in technology that improves the environment around them.
Yeah. James, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you very much.
That was James Shale, Dyson Service Manager for Australia and New Zealand. Actually, James, I've got to jump in. Service Manager, I think you need a better title than that because your expertise is quite extraordinary and Service Manager doesn't quite describe it enough, I reckon.
I mean, I think we can use engineer. I've worked as an engineering manager for 5 years in the company.
I'm going to go expert engineer, James, because I think it sounds much better than service manager. Anyway, thank you for being with us. Of course, Dyson is a supporter of this podcast. This is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. Join us every morning for the full episode of Fear and Greed, Australia's most popular business podcast. I'm Sean Aylmer. Enjoy your day.